What a day, everyone. At least we're saying 4,300 and not saying 4,200 on the S&P, which is a nice change. You have the breakout from Friday, and all we've done is form a little doji here despite all the clamoring on what's going on out there. And I think that's a really important distinction. NASDAQ is actually going sideways here, and we did make a new high. We're going to talk about what's leading the NASDAQ. We did get a sell signal on something called the Hindenburg Omen, and we're going to review this. Apple hitting an all-time high only to reverse, why Unity Software is breaking out, and Tesla with one of its best closes since about November, which is really nice. So we have a ton to go over. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, please subscribe to the channel. Click all notifications if you want actionable information for the next day. What we go over here is very applicable and actionable. So let's jump into it. So coming straight across the ES, and we're going to use the S&P 500. All we did was form a flag. So I know we had this major sell-off at the end of the day. We're going to discuss what exactly happened there. But as we said on Saturday, looking at this hourly, you're overbought. We know we were overbought coming into this. It was not rocket science. So we knew that this was a possibility of just kind of grinding and going sideways. But even that said, I think there's an important distinction here. We flipped 42, 43. Then broke out, came back with this wonky bar on Friday on that non-farm payroll data that nobody understood. Broke out, pulls back, and now look at us. So again, every time, no matter if we say it's a mishap or it's not a mishap, there's one constant that's happening. We're going higher. Now, at the same time, we're kind of lollygagging into it, for lack of a better word. We're not exactly lifting. We're not exactly pushing on these moves. So you're not really seeing like these rips. And I think that's frustrating people. Frankly, I think it's more frustrating for the bears. And this is a great example. I'll show you what I mean. So here we are, 9:30 open, and we're just going to mark that, right? So here we are at that 9:30 open. NASDAQ's rallying. We're hitting new highs. And then we start breaking the lows. Well, this is where you're going to start seeing a bunch of people start blowing out because their stops are triggered. Okay, so they're going to start blowing out here, right? Because clearly, one of two things is going to happen. Number one, my longs are definitely dead because we're taking out lows of the day. And clearly, this is where I would short now, right? And yeah, everyone's going to tell me that they short at the highs all the time, but let's be realistic. The majority of people wait for the market to roll before it drops. The majority of people do not short here. This was pretty clear that this was after Apple. We're going to get into that. But when you look at this, we all know that the majority of people are not shorting here. Some people are going to say they are, and some of them actually are. The majority of people that say they are probably are not, right? They're waiting for these breaks, and then they're looking to get out and get what they can. And then you're just starting to see these rips. And what are these rips doing? Well, they're just absolutely crushing the people that are trading these zero-dated options. They're absolutely destroying them. And so I would just suggest that if you were one of those people that's been playing with those for a period of time, you need to be a little careful because the game's changing a lot. And the game's changed a lot over the past week, and we've discussed some of that. So your tools that you use to trade, think of them as tools in a toolbox. There are sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver. I changed the mic up according to somebody that's in the Alpha Chasers community that's in AV. So if you notice a difference, good or bad, just let me know. They had an idea, and I'm trying it tonight. Does seem better, but you guys let me know if you good, bad, or if you even notice anything. I appreciate it. You look at the NASDAQ, you look where you're wedged in here, you look back at these February 22nd highs, and no one thought we would ever get there, right? But here we are, and what are we doing? Well, we're pushing. Well, as we continue to push, that's all we really need to see, right? Here's your little pullback, and then you rallied, and then you hit a new high. So you can see anything you want about today. You can say we're overbought, which we are. We're going to talk about this omen that's looming, that's giving us a sell signal. That's all fine and dandy. Bottom line is we went up today. Now we could talk about the Fed and what the Fed's going to do next week and why prices are going to drop. But quite frankly, no one can tell me with 100% certainty what's going to happen in 5 minutes, let alone next week. So as I like to say, we trade what's in front of us. What's in front of us? This little wonky doji and the doji that hit a new high and the RSI is still pointing up. All right, so what exactly happened in the market today? The easiest way for you to determine what happened in the market today is create a list. In my opinion, the easiest way to do this besides looking at sectors is you create a list. So my list right here that I just pulled over, this is the NASDAQ 100. Now, if I click symbols, it's going to give me alphabetical order. That and a bowl of soup gets me a bowl of soup. There's a button, and if I click percentage change on the day, that's going to sort the NASDAQ 100. Then I can see if there's any pattern here that makes any sense. And then, of course, I'm sure you guys already see this, but pull this over, drop that right there. Give me 1 second. Software, software, software. I'm not going to say it again. Zoom into it, right? Legacy company, Autodesk. But what you're seeing is what is leading? Software names. Okay, so it's not rocket science if we say we're rotating into software names. If we go through this list, you know, out of the big dogs, if you're going to go look for the big dogs on a percentage basis, it's clear, right? Out of the top 5, like real big dogs, where are you? Tesla. All right, so this tells you very emphatically that we are rotating in the NASDAQ into software. It tells you that we are playing with Tesla, and Tesla is the strongest name, I would say, out of the big 7. I think that's pretty obvious to most people. And that would mean that that's the one that if we're going to trade, if the NASDAQ runs, that might make the most sense. Also, it was the one that didn't turn red today when the whole NASDAQ fell apart for a very brief period of time. So that's something to think about. So that's a really simple thing that anybody can do. Now, while we're here, we might as well just go through Tesla and take a look here. We're over, we closed. I mean, a close is a close. I'm going to take the W, right? Because I'm long, I'm happy, we gapped up, we held it, and I'm over my line. I'm over my demarcation line. Now, am I going to stay there? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, you could absolutely break this doji roll, but if you start looking at what's been happening, all they're doing is buying. That's all they're doing. We are overbought, and that might mean that we start bouncing around a little bit. And I don't know what the Fed does. I have my opinion on what the Fed does, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. And then you have two sides of that, right? We have to guess what the Fed's going to do. If you take a look at, you know, Fed funds, right? You have two things you have to do with Fed funds, right? You have to guess what they're going to do, and then you have to assume that if they do what you want them to do via pause or via hike or via cut, that then the market's going to respond the way that you think it is. So there's a lot there, and that's why I tend to avoid that, because sometimes you'll start noticing a dichotomy, right? You expect one thing to happen and something else happens. A great example of this, and then we'll get into this. There's a couple charts I want to show before we get into the Hindenburg Omen. But if you take a look at the ES, this is a great example. Every trader out there looked at this line and said, if non-farm payrolls come out, we're definitely going to sell off. Okay, when they come out and they come out hot, boy, they're definitely going to come out hot. The banks are wrong at the price, and this is going to come out. And what happened? They were 100% right. We came out hot. What they didn't account for was that the past 13 or 14 times we came in hot. So what's it matter? It didn't. They blew it off, and then they found something else to focus on. And then they said, oh, well, the hours that people worked were not as great as they were to the non-farm payrolls. That means people are participating less. That means non-farm payrolls is actually worse than we thought. It's nonsense. They found a reason to convince themselves of something, and then they acted on what they convinced themselves to do, right? I hope that makes sense. You might want to play that again. But the bottom line is, if I was to tell you what is the market going to do if non-farm payrolls comes out and it's hideous, and by the way, this was hideous, you'd expect the market to sell down. What did it do? Challenged 4,300. Now, in the video I'm going to spend a little time with, because I want people to understand this. Everyone knows I'm bullish on the name. I still like the name. I am long the name. We've been banging it around a lot in the community. Very difficult to state to build a huge position at this price without stability in the chart. We're going to get to that. So a lot of these charts are forming what I call kill zones, meaning something's going to happen. And what that something is, I don't know. You could actually argue that the back side of this is somewhat of a diamond pattern, but you don't know how this is going to play out, right? So this is what I have, and I have to go with what I have. Now, if you look at the simplistics, here's your gap fill, test, rallies. Gap fill, tests, rallies. So something really interesting happened today, or what I think was interesting. When the market dropped and we started falling apart, this stopped dropping. And this stopped dropping sooner than the majority of other names. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, one of my demarcation lines, or one of the indicators that I like to use in the middle of the day for intraday trading, especially lately. Sometimes I have different setups, but right now this seems to just be working very well for me. I'm going to clean all these lines off just to make life easier for us. But if you see this turn right here at 245, okay, that's all you need to know. And you held. So all of a sudden at 245, I'm like, well, let's just put the low. So then you're like, okay, well, there's the low. on the day, and all they did was stop hunt, take money from people, get people to short because clearly NVIDIA is going down because it's really expensive, right? Which it's actually cheaper now than it was previously. I can do a whole video on it. The bottom line, and let me know if you want to see valuation videos and how to read fundamentals. Comment on that if that's something that's of interest. I'm more than happy to do it. But you have one of you have the AI name in the space right now, and we're going to talk about Apple in a moment here. And what you're seeing here is all they did was undercut, and oh, we're definitely going to break because there's the H, we're holding the 9, there's the low, and you start convincing yourself and telling yourself a story, right? And then what's it do? Flushes everybody out and then rips. Today I came in with a position and I traded around that position. We noticed that 395 continues to be a level of contention, right? You can see that right up here. It's going to come straight across here and just drop this. So when you come across, you'll see some contention up here, see a little battle up here, and then we've been playing with that level I just drew, right? You can see that. So that's probably a level to watch, 395, 395.50. So we're playing around with it, and then what do? Well, they give us the dreaded what? Right here, right? They start giving us the dreaded lower highs. Well, clearly we're going to go down because this is what's happened. And then what do? Well, they confirm that what you think is going to happen, right? Because here's the neckline. So now we broke the neckline on the day, right? So clearly we're going to take out the lows and we should get out. And then what does the stock do? Rallies into the end of the day, and there was about 3 or 4 points there on a trade. I position traded around what I have today. But I don't have anywhere near on what I'd like to. But as soon as we flipped right here and held, went long, took a couple dollars out, and that offset what we were down on the day, which I think we closed down $1 or something. And that just helps me manage the trade. Again, I can do a whole video on how to manage a trade long term, like legitimately stay in a stock long term and just bat it around by trading intraday or swing trade other positions. Maybe I should do a video on that. Comment if you want to see a video on that too. I think that'd be a good topic the more I think about it. So there's NVIDIA. Now, why are we talking about NVIDIA? Because of this. So here's the SOX, right? And then we look at the SOX and go, well, the SOX undercut the low right around the same time as NVIDIA. And what time was that? Okay, that was around 2:30, a dentist's favorite time. I'm sure you guys all know that joke. If you come here and then you look at this and you see that 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock level, and then the washout, and then the rally. Well, I think that's somewhat interesting to note that these names did not fall apart today. Why not? Well, I think they're done falling apart. I think that they're a little washed out. Now, I have no way to confirm that. I'm not going to know for the next couple of days. I'm not crazy about getting into this gap and testing this, but I'm along this line. And if I flip here and you start making higher highs on some of these names, you're going to get a push. You're going to get a little bit of a panic. And let's just talk about this. Yep, you're wedged in here like this, and we all see this wedge, right? But let's talk about this. You're wedged in after an enormous quarter, right? We could talk about the earnings, the valuation, everything. You had every reason to break there today. What did you do? You closed above the open and you gap filled, okay? You didn't have to do that. Now, they made life very easy because if you break 387, you probably have a problem, okay? So if we break 387, there might be a problem there, and we'll take a look at it and figure out how to go from there. But if you start pushing here and you start flipping that doji, okay, then that's going to get you to a point where even if you close on the flip of that doji, then you're going to basically have the second highest close on NVIDIA of all time. That is going to scare the living heck out of institutions. Remember, you're in June. You have the Fed meeting next week, but after the Fed meeting in 2 weeks, you have second quarter window dressing, okay, which is where all the banks want to show that they own the top names. All the funds want to show that they own the top names. Because if they don't own the top names, why do you have your money with? So they do window dressing at the end. Something to think about, pay attention to. Apple, all they had to do was say 2 letters, AI, and they refused. Instead, they came out with about a $4,000 headset that probably 7 people are going to be able to afford. So I don't really understand the rationale and the reason behind what they did, but there's a reason they're a multi-trillion-dollar company and I don't run one. So you kind of have to look at this and go, okay, well, why would you do that? And what's so exciting about what you did? I'm not really sure. Maybe that's the price point, and then over time that price point gets lower and lower, like happened with the iPod. I don't know, just like the iPhone, and then they have the higher end ones. But the bottom line is you hit all-time highs. So do I really care that we sold down? Yeah, I'm not crazy about it because I own this. So I'm not crazy about it, but candidly, I bought some at the close, and I do think that we have the possibility of seeing some investment banks come out tomorrow and be somewhat positive on it. Like, you don't lose $6 on a multi-trillion-dollar company because you don't like what happens that day, right? Again, window dressing this week, I have a hard time believing that this is just going to fall out of bed. Now, could it? Absolutely. Have I been wrong in the past? Absolutely. But it just doesn't make sense to me. Now, they partnered with you, and you can see in the middle of the day how it did. Just out of nowhere, they partnered with them. Huge deal for them, and then the stock just exploded and pulled back, and now you're bouncing around. We're going to have to see how this plays out. I'd be very apprehensive. I would not chase things like this right now. I'd be very, very careful. What I would be doing across the board with all my positions is I'd be looking at them every single day and determining where my stops are, okay? And I'd be giving them breathing room. If you are in the right names, and if you've been following this, you've been watching these videos, you should know what the right names are. I don't really have to go through them all. But I would also just watch XLC and watch how we're acting right in here, okay? We need to flip this level. Netflix is something, I like this. I am not crazy about that wick, but that could have just been end-of-day jitters. We don't know. There is a signal that went off we're about to get into, but I saw these names, Meta. These names are all setting up to go higher. I look at these wicks and I don't really feel that, I don't think these wicks are holding the same magnitude that they once did. I think there's some kind of trading going on here where they're knocking them down. So in other words, like you look here and how we had Wick City, and then just out of nowhere we popped over just like this doji, and then we flipped the next day. But everybody that's looking at this doji, right, on Meta, we're all looking at it, and this is what I do. I analyze charts all the time. So you're looking at that doji going, oh, I'm not buying that. Well, what's that look like? Oh, I'm not buying that. That's a doji, right? And then you kind of flip to it and go look at Meta and go, well, you know, I'm not going to buy that here. Okay, and then it's up $20. So we're seeing a lot of that. And so one of the things that I have been stressing to people, and I will stress to you as well, I would widen your time frame with some of these. Okay, the idea that AI is going to be around for 8 weeks and you have to get in right away, but you don't have to get into that fervor. Just use your skill set and figure out the right price to get in. Now, I would watch XLC very carefully. I've been watching XLK. Okay, I do not think that looks awful. It still looks like a high tight flag to me. We never took out the low of the flag. I don't see a reason to panic there. If we take a look at the SPY looks fine. So it's not like they're out of whack. Now, you're going to see a lot of people quoting this, and this is the Hindenburg Omen. And what I like to do with these kinds of things is get ahead of them before you start seeing this everywhere and everybody talking about this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Okay, first off, here's the Hindenburg Omen. Second of all, this is from Sediment Trader. I did not create this, so just FYI. And I have talked to them in the past about using their information here, and they're fine with it. But if you look here, okay, the important thing about this omen is the following. I don't care if it hit once. You start getting 3 or 4 of these, I start to care. 3 or 4, you start clustering, you have my attention, okay? I'm not clustering. I'm getting 1, okay? I'm not getting this. And that's an important distinction. Now, it's important for me that people understand what it is that they're looking for. The Hindenburg Omen is a technical warning sign that's created by this guy, James. In the 90s, worked for this guy in the 70s. Monitors conditions that analysts have looked through history signifying potential weakness underlying the market. For a particular signal, we use 3 criteria. So this tells you what you're looking at and how that's calculated. When you start understanding how these indicators are calculated and oscillators are calculated, you are way ahead of 99.9% of traders. There's real edge there. You might want to write that down and remember that. The NASDAQ 100 is above its 50-day moving average. Yes, it is. So we met 1. Both the 52-week lows and 52-week highs of the NASDAQ are greater than 2.8% of all advancing declining issues. That kind of makes sense as we have all that junk out there. And then we have this group of stocks that's hitting highs. So the NASDAQ McClellan oscillator is negative, which it is. Okay, so now we know the 3. Now, we have that out of the way. NASDAQ Hindenburg Omen. We know what it is now, right? 3 years is what you have here. It's marked by blue, and I'm going to use 3 years. And what I'm trying to get people to understand with this is, okay, so I've got 1 here by itself. So I had 1 here by itself. How'd that go? Let me just draw that properly. Got it? Okay, so you're right in there. All right. Does that look like something we should have sold or something we should have bought? Okay, so do these always signify a bottom, or do they signify a change in trend, right? There's a huge difference here, and when you understand what these are, it makes all the difference. So in other words, yeah, the oscillator could be negative, but it might not stay negative. Now you have 30 days for that oscillator to turn. In 30 days, we could push higher, the oscillator could turn. Now, when you start getting clumps together, like you got clumps in here, you start paying attention, right? When you get like 4 days, 5 days together like that, that's when you want to start paying attention to it. And that is not that common, right? So if you look at these types of clusters, you'll see them in here. Let's clean this off and start over. But you'll see these kinds of clusters, right? Like in here, 07, 08. We can even go back a little further because I'd like to show you 2000 so you can see how glaring it was. And yeah, that'll do it. So let's clean this off and drop this bad boy. That'll do it. Perfect. So here are the 90s. You can see how many times this thing was firing. But look at how dark these lines are in here, right? So this gave us a really good indication that that was going to be an issue. Okay, this signified the financial crisis. Okay, that gave us an issue. So I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying there's no value in what the Hindenburg omen is saying. What I'm saying about it is that at the end of the day, it is one data point. And right now, you have one data point, like you had here. And if you got out here and you were looking out a year, you're a little aggravated at yourself, right? If you did it here, again, you'd be a little aggravated. So it's the clusters of this omen that are important. Hope that was helpful. Have a great night, everybody.